This is Mayor Tom O'Leary coming to you on a Monday before council meeting. We've got an experiment, I would say, or a first time on city council tomorrow night. And so I encourage people, as we often do with these live streams, to be patient with the technology tomorrow. But city council is set up to conduct a virtual meeting, something that was authorized by the General Assembly with some of the emergency legislation. There's a couple of things I want to mention before we talk a bit about the agenda about tomorrow night. If you want to be a public participant, the way the rules for tomorrow night are going to read is if you have a question. So if after tonight you're intrigued by something that is said, or you take a look at the agenda and you have a question about something on the agenda, the way the rules read, you're going to need to contact the clerk of council before the meeting so that your question can be advanced or forwarded to city council. So it won't be interactive in the sense that you'll be able to ask questions from your home or from wherever you're viewing it, but you will be able to view it. That's the technical plan. You will be able to view the council meeting from home tomorrow night. I want to take a few minutes before we get to questions. Just make a comment or two. I'm about exhausted. I watched the governor and lieutenant governor and Director Acton for an hour or so today, trying to glean from their questions and their answers where we may be going next. And then I had the pleasure of listening to the president talk for a while about his total power. So we won't get into a constitutional debate, but I think we live in times when federalism is going to be redefined, and I have my concerns about that. So those people are praying for a full recovery. I think that's one of the things we want to do. We want to see a full recovery of the federal system and the role of local and state government. So anyways, if you feel better that we have presidents in total control, then sleep tight tonight. So I want to say, personalizing for a little bit, my wife is going to be really upset I went that direction, but after watching a few hours of that, I just felt like I had to let that stressor safety valve release a little bit. Tomorrow night, pretty important council meeting, as council meetings go. They're going to be from 6 to 7, 3 committee meetings that will discuss legislation that's going to be proposed and my hope is voted on tomorrow night. So I encourage you, if you can, to tune in or watch a replay of the council meeting tomorrow night. I'm going to use crib notes. I usually don't. I want to make sure I mention all the legislation that's important. The first item, really there are 4 new items. Gosh, I want to say 5 new items, 4 pieces of legislation and an appointment. And then there's 1 item for a second reading. The second reading has to do with adjusting the pay scales for about a dozen of the city's 100 employees. Those would be non-union employees, non-elected officials. And there are several of those individuals who are very veteran employees, have topped out in their pay scale. And so there was certainly a desire, continues to be a desire to make wage adjustments for those individuals similar to those that the union employees negotiated. When this first legislation was first introduced, it's kind of funny, not in a humorous way, but it got held up for several weeks. And for these people that are involved, all of the commotion that resulted from the coronavirus, the stay-at-home order, and then subsequently what's a pretty predictable reduction in city revenues have put those raises a little bit in a question mark area. But I'm hoping council will go ahead and make an adjustment to those wage scales and wage rates. And then for the most part, the service director, in a couple of situations, the chief of police, chief of fire chief, will have some employees under their supervision who really are the folks that we're talking about. So for the most part, it will be back into the hands of the service director to make a determination about what, if any, increases are in line for a handful of city employees. So that's legislation. That's number one. It's up for a second reading. Was held to a first reading because we were down a member 2 weeks ago. So I think that is what I would have described it as routine and necessary a couple of weeks ago. But now with the financial picture, there may be some discussion about the ability of the city to fund or afford those wage adjustments, and maybe some discussion about whether or not they're appropriate at this time. So that's I think a number one, if you will. The next piece of legislation involves a transfer appropriation. I think I'm looking at the way it reads, amending appropriations. Really what we're doing is looking at the stormwater fund. The way the budget was put together, there's too much money in there for actual projects. And as it turns out, there's not enough money for the engineering for us to develop the plans for the next stormwater project. And for those people who follow this, we're really in a multi-year cycle of extending storm sewers to a part of the community that lies very low. You can think of it roughly between Smith Street and Dawson, running east out to 6th Avenue. That whole area, which includes East Park and a lot of the residential areas and what I call the numbered streets, really has inadequate storm sewer. And we've been working at it ever since I became mayor, trying to, in a systematic way, move out to 6th Avenue, and then have much more of a complete stormwater, active stormwater system for those residents that part of Galion. So that's a transfer of existing spending authority from a project to engineering for a project. So it needs to happen so that we can stay on top of this step-by-step methodical planned process to extend storm sewers to a large part of the area, a large part of the community that doesn't have storm sewer. Next item. Seems like it was only 2 weeks ago, been a long 2 weeks for a lot of us, that City Council approved a recommendation that had worked its way through 2 different committees within city government involving Freeze Foundation funds. The short version of the story is, after a $465,000 request, which met the dollars that were available to the city from the Freeze Foundation, within the mayor's office, we looked at some of those projects, and for a variety of reasons, we can get into the detail if there's some questions, but for the most part, we're not sure when some of our public parks will be open, and therefore we're not sure the value we would receive from some of those proposed projects. 2 of them, I think, will be among the last things that the state will allow the city to re-engage in, and that's renting our pavilions. And we had proposed a new shelter house, if you will, at Heisey Park near the playground, and then another project that had a higher budget that was really going to provide a second log cabin, if you will, out at East Park. Our ability to host gatherings over 10 is absolutely limited, and the uncertainty about when that cap will be lifted and under what circumstances caused us to hit the brakes and think a little bit about all of the Freeze projects. So some of the other ones that were initially approved involved netting for the Pico softball fields. Same thing. Not sure when and if we'll be able to have that park open to host events and to have even league games, even, you know, the local girls softball program is more questions than answers around that program. So that's another project that has been um, that we're looking at furloughing or pushing back at least to the end of the year. And the final set of projects that we're probably not going to do, we're going to put on hold any funding that would have gone to support school facilities. Again, not knowing what, if any, types of fall sports will happen. So we decided for those reasons, and due to the fact that I think those people who know much about the Freeze Foundation are familiar that it's an endowment, much of which is invested in the stock market and other more secure facilities. And quite honestly, like everything else that was stock related, the foundation took the endowment took quite a beating in that first quarter. So the logic is, let's do a limited number of projects, and that's what this legislation talks about doing, a limited number of projects, and for the most part, returning back to the foundation the balance of that money that the city was entitled to. Really trying to absorb some of the losses that they've experienced in this first part of 2020. So as it stands now, we're going to offer up essentially a major rebuild of the Heisey Park pool and a remulching and reconstruction of the bases around the existing playgrounds, if you will, in Heisey Park and out at East Park. If you've been over there with your kids or grandkids, you've noticed that they're pitted out quite a bit, and I think we want to make those surfaces safer. And so what we're going to do is talk to council about a scaled back version, something slightly under $100,000 for freeze funds, and then return the money. And then the other option, quite honestly, is if we're not going to open the pool, and that's yet to be determined, it may not be such a bad idea, and definitely worth council considering delaying all projects until we get a better idea of what our summer schedule is going to be like, and what parts of our park system will be able to have open to the public. So that's that piece of legislation. Just want to say before I leave that topic that read an article today that came out of the Knox County newspaper. I don't know what they call themselves down there, Knox News, and they shut down their park for 2020. Excuse me, their swimming pool. It's a water park that has an admission, but it's a big swimming pool, quite an attraction down there. Been there over a dozen years, and they've decided not to open that in 2020. So that may be indications of things to come as it relates to our pool. So we're going to take a look at the necessity and the advisability of spending scarce freeze dollars on pool improvements that we may not be able to use until 2021. Just as a side comment before I get off of that, the issue of the Freeze Foundation and that legislation, I think the same fate, if you will, is in the yet to be determined category with reference to our splash park. We're not quite sure what the requirements will be, but we are looking at ways to step up sanitation facilities, meaning wipes to wipe down the play apparatus, and plenty of hand sanitizer for our parks. So we'll certainly be installing those features at the Heisey Park, new what I call Graders Park or Heritage Park, and then out at the Splash Park to make sure we have those parts of the social distancing that we're, I suppose, getting used to present, and that we can keep any type of contamination of those surfaces to a minimum. So that's a little bit, maybe more than we wanted to get into on the parks, but that's that piece of legislation as it relates to the Freeze Foundation. Let me pull this back up because you know how your memory gets. The next two pieces of legislation, one involves a request that we received from Avita Foundation, and they have an unprecedented level of preparedness and becoming ready for what may not be the surge that some predicted, but I certainly think will be an unprecedented pressure on the Avita health system. And they made a request for a list of investments that they need for readiness and for emergency operation. And so we'll get into a full discussion tomorrow night, I hope, with council about a request to take $40,000 from our unappropriated general fund balance, a little bit over 6 million that we have currently in the general fund, and put that in a place that if Avita and the Avita Foundation need it for preparedness for this COVID virus pandemic, that there'll be up to $40,000 for them to access to try to make sure that they have all the preparedness that they need. Without getting into too much detail, I think they're projecting a need of in and around $230,000 to $250,000 for a range of materials, preparedness, masks, things that they need to weather the storm, and also those items that aren't used. It's my understanding that they'll be put in reserve, and they'll be maintained in a reserve for use at Galion Community Hospital. So we'll kind of see how that goes. I don't want to get into too much of the presentation on why I think this is an important piece of legislation, but if you stop and think about it, it has been decades since the city of Galion has had an employer that was such an important part of our local economy, not only in terms of the number of people they employ and the kinds of jobs that they have, in terms of income and talent and the employment they provide for area or local people, but also extremely important to the city of Galion in order to be able to have the funds to be able to provide the police, fire, and other necessary services. So they're an extremely important part of our local economy. And as mayor, I don't want to be here when they ask for a little bit of assistance and we're slow to respond or we don't respond. That can only portend poorly for the city as we go down the road. And as the hospital, as we know, it has changed significantly over the last decade or more. There's nothing about today's health crisis that causes me to believe that things will get back to some sort of normal in the healthcare area. A strong Avita and a strong local healthcare system is important today. It's going to be important over the next 6 months or a year or so. And part of what I'm saying is it's going to be important to the city of Galion over the next 5 or 10 years. So they need a little bit of temporary support, and we'll have I hope, healthy and constructive discussion about providing up to $40,000 of funding for Avita to be able to get set up and be able to hit whatever surge they encounter here in North Central Ohio. So that is, I guess it's ordinance number 22. So that should be an interesting conversation. And I really, as I've said a couple of times before, encourage people to participate. The next one really is gets into more of an operational change that I know myself, and I've recommended the service director that we ask council to amend. The existing ordinance allows us as the administration to have up to 3 months of a grace period. That's really the wrong word. We have 3 months if somebody is going to be shut off, usually is electric in Galion. We are able to set up a payment plan that gives them 90 days to recover and get back even with us. For a lot of reasons that can be debated, maybe some people will agree. If you disagree with me, then pay your bill on time and then complain. If you agree with me, you understand the pressure that so many of the Galion utility customers are under to pressure to pay their bill on time. And I think our expectation is that people who have not been chronically delinquent or maybe never been delinquent, that we're going to have dozens, if not 100 or more customers who now will be in an unprecedented situation in their lives. And so what we're going to try to do is ask council to give the service director and the billing department up to 6 months to work out some of these payment arrangements. What will happen if somebody is already behind and then they have 90 days more to run up a bill? They'll get to the end of this 90-day period and the bills will be will result in a balance that can't be met and a lose-lose all the way around. So we're going to have a discussion at committee and then in council about allowing a 6-month grace period to get through this pandemic and some of the financial disruption or dislocation, or heck, all the revenue dried up in a household. We need to be able to provide the utilities that those families need and be able to come up with the means for the rest of the ratepayers in town to be paid back, if you will, by allowing those people who have been, I think it's become popular to say, unemployed through no fault of their own, but put in this position through no fault of their own, give them some time to get back on their feet. So that is ordinance number 23, and I think my hope is that most of these will pass on initial reading, but if not, we've got them in the hopper, if you will, and they'll move towards final passage, I'm confident. The last piece of legislation, then I want to come back to 2 other items if there are questions after I've rattled on. I made fun of in my own way, made fun of the governor and the president for droning on, and here I am 20 minutes into droning, but that as they feel what they have to say is important, I guess I feel like what I have to say is important. So I want to mention, just in passing, not that it's not a significant step, is the Gallion Health Board, which has really had a lot of responsibility on its shoulders, our local health commissioner, will now be back up to full strength with the appointment of Andrea Wiltenthaler to fill out that 5-person board. It's a kind of reappointment of Andy, who resigned a few years ago and has agreed to come back, as we really need some members. We were down 2 members, and so really appreciate somebody with the knowledge and experience of what the health department does coming back onto the board to help Trish Factor and the rest of the board get through the next several months in what seemed to be kind of unprecedented times for public health. There are times when you think the health department's nothing but a nuisance and a pain in the neck to budget, and then you realize how central they are to protecting the public health and getting us to the other side of this challenge. Speaking, two more things real quick. I'm going to talk almost in code for a couple of minutes. If when I say PRC, you know what that means, then focus in. There have been, and if you don't, it means prevention, retention, and contingency. And it's a special part of the federal TANF, which is the Federal Welfare Block Grant, temporary aid to needy families. Through the TANF, there has been an emergency COVID-19 allocation that the state has pushed out to the counties. It isn't a whole lot, but it's going to be a whole lot if you're somebody who is in a difficult position needing to pay rent, utilities, and there's a list of items that are pretty much common to PRC. But what's important and worth mentioning now is that these dollars are available to TANF eligible families, even if they've had a PRC award or received PRC funding in the last couple of years. So what I would encourage you, if you know what PRC is and you think you might be eligible, then get ready. I'll give you a number in a minute. If you are in an unprecedented situation, it's like, man, I've always worked, I've always had my money, I've always earned my money, I've never need money to help with rent, utilities, etc., or food, SNAP, food assistance. God, it's crappy, but you may have to swallow your pride, and you may find that this assistance, coupled with assistance from Community Action through the HEAP program, may be your best new friend. And so if you're kind of stuck in a situation, you're not quite sure what to do, and you're trying to decide whether to make application for programs at Job and Family Services, take a minute or two and check into this program. It may get you through the next couple of months. I'd be full of crap if I said it'd be a lifesaver, but it may make really tough times a little bit easier. So if you know you're PRC eligible, but you think you need assistance now, or based on what happened to you, having lost a job due to the COVID virus, or you've had a major dislocation in income, call this number, 419-562-8066. And the other thing I do, if you're hungry, and hunger has a way of melting through some false sense of pride, take advantage of some of the food boxes that are available through Community Action. The number there is 468-5121. And then there are a number of other churches that are running food pantry operations. And if you call up here at City Hall tomorrow, we'll give you all that information. I think we'll have Matt go ahead and stick that up on the internet. So again, there's a lot right with charity, so take advantage of it. Nobody asked to get dumped in this situation. And if you're like I am, my head's kind of spinning with all that's going on and all the decisions that we thought we were going to be making and things that we thought we're going to accomplish in 2020, and now we're up to this sort of hold the line and try to get ready to work our way back to normal and recover a pretty solid life that I think Galleon had begun to be on the recovery. We're not that far off the track to get back. So I guess I'll stop there. There are other things going on in the city, but again, as I said before, you've had the governor on for a long time, the president on for a long time. I don't want to be the local person who goes on past time that people are interested in questions. Any questions?
Yeah, I guess started with earlier. We did have a couple people asking when they'd be able to disc golf again.
Yeah, when those guys must not have lost their job, huh? Holy Toledo, I got a call from a guy. He's out disc golfing. I thought we were supposed to stay at home, but that's all I'll say about disc golf. I won't get mad, but I'd love to get mad. It's like, really? People ask about disc golf? Yeah. I had a friend die over the weekend, so go play disc golf. Maybe we won't catch you. It's ridiculous. But no, we're going to follow the rules, and it's been determined by the public health authorities that disc golf's not going to be open. So I probably know these people, and I might even like them, but it's crap. Get your head out of your disc golf bag. This is serious for some people. Do something for somebody else that playing around disc golf. Oh, well. Any other questions after that happy response? Did I scare them all away, man? But anyway, I don't mean to be jerky about it, but man, it'll be open when it's open. It'll be open when the governor says it's safe to be open. And it's that kind of attitude that gets left. I'm going to start sounding like Andrew Cuomo, so I'll shut up right now. I don't need to give you a lecture, but if you're out there flagrantly disregarding, I hope that the cops get introduced to you out there. There were a bunch of cars out there the other day. I don't know what's wrong with people. I'm 5, 6, 7 cars. I was out on County Line Road, and I looked through to where you park there. A bunch of people out playing disc golf. Fishing's a little bit different, maybe. You're out there by yourself, and maybe you got to eat, but disc golf. All right. Well, maybe they'll get $600 of extra unemployment and buy a new disc golf bag.
Okay, next we had a suggestion from William. He asked if it's possible to put speed bumps through Hayes Park, just out of concern for when the playgrounds do eventually open, having kids running back and forth.
Speed bumps, no. I'd consider divots, where they cut out the speed bumps, sort of reverse speed bumps. There's enough motorcycle traffic and bicycle traffic in the park. I don't want to push all the bicycle traffic onto the sidewalk. Seems like that's where a lot of the kids ride their bikes. But now we'll talk about that. Milling out divots to slow people down going through there, but my concern with a raised speed bump has to do with motorcycles and bicycles. So, pretty good suggestion. We'll take a look at that, particularly if one, we're open and we generate large crowds. People got to act irresponsibly. I'm gonna have fun with those disc golfers. I almost bet I know who they are, but maybe the same guys who are out playing disc golf need speed bumps to slow the heck down the park. What do you think? Huh? Maybe not. All right.
Okay, next I want to point out we have a group joining us tonight, so I want to recognize Galleon Blog Central. Welcome. They said, I have heard that Avita is cutting employee hours and days of the work week, including their nursing staff, and they're having to do forced paid time off. They don't know this for a fact, just something that they've heard.
This is what I know. As late as the request from Avita for some assistance to be able to meet all the requirements that the state is making for readiness. That's sort of contrary to that they've been doing everything they can to keep staff on board. Some people who know me or know where I live know I live right across the street from the hospital. I've never seen anything like it. It's amazing. We got a freaking health emergency. We got 5 cars in the parking lot. So I think that the organization, the management has done has done and continue will do as much as they can to keep people working. And that's probably all I'll say. One of the things I'm almost certain of, and I don't know much on this subject, is that as they talk about bringing the economy back around, as they talk about phasing things in, one of my great hopes is that they begin to allow Avita and other hospitals who, in one sense, they're a business. They've got to generate income or they can't have all of the modern equipment. They can't have the kinds of services they have unless they can conduct some business in there. So my hope is that they'll be among the first businesses that are allowed to get back to outpatient surgeries and some of those sorts of things, which then would generate some income, and these layoffs that you're maybe hearing about or furloughs that you're hearing about, paid time off, those sorts of things. They won't happen, or there'll be less of it. So I don't know. I don't know if I answered your question or not, but I think Avita has done a really solid job trying to keep as many people on the payroll, even though a lot of the tasks that they do on a daily basis are really idle because they're involved in inpatient surgery, outpatient surgery, those kinds of procedures that they have followed the guidance of the state and discontinued those and are paying a price for it. So I don't know. I sure hope this is what I think. I think that if they have to lay off people, they'll lay off a minimum, and they want not to do that because they haven't so far. And I think they'll be anxious to bring people back as soon as possible. You know, that's a field, it's hard to get good help. And so they've got good help. They don't want to start laying people off. Nobody wants to do that where you've got certification, you've got experience, you've got skill. So if they are forced to do that, then that's a good sign. We need to somehow, I think, bring some of those healthcare facilities back online, allow them to do some necessary elective surgeries and things of that sort. So I better shut up because some people think I don't even know how to patch potholes, and now I am giving advice about what parts of the economy should come back first. But we got to get the healthcare. We got to get Avita back in business of providing healthcare, other than being ready for the COVID wave to wash ashore. So, Matt, I think I'm probably making everyone who asks a question mad, but see if we can keep it going here. It's the best thing that'll happen is people won't ask any questions and we'll just go home. But No, I don't mean to be rough on people, but what else we got?
Next question tonight came from Danielle
Mhm.
in regard to testing for
Yeah.
COVID. Is it possible at this point to test people who have already had it or possibly already had it?
Gonna do something just for like so that my wife and other people. I did vote for Trump. I'll probably vote for him again. So don't get me wrong here. But I'm gonna avoid this temptation to start answering questions about crap I don't know anything about. I'm gonna stay about what I know about. I don't know much about COVID testing. I do believe in listening carefully to what the state officials have said, that until we have a regime, the ability to test people in non-essential businesses to make sure that those employees come back, either have the antibodies and or can test positively, or actually they test negatively for the actual virus, that we're going to have a devil of a time getting people back to work. And I've also shared here at the office, and this comes from a lot of reading and from watching as much as I can on it. I think that employers that don't have that daily thermometer testing regime are going to have that in place before non-essential folks come back. So um, I really see that what I'm concerned about as it relates to public activities. I'll kind of switch and over answer the question, Danielle. Anybody out there wondering what we're going to do about 4th of July and fireworks? Because I don't know what we're going to do yet, but one of the things that I'm pretty certain is that until we have more testing, those kinds of what turn out to be large public events in which the social distancing, it's almost funny to imagine Heisey Park on a 4th of July fireworks night with everybody practicing social distancing. But I think that until we have testing on a mass regime, we're going to be operating somewhere between how we are totally locked down now and what becomes the new normal. So I don't know much about testing, but we need a lot more of it. I've got a couple of family relatives who work in the emergency department, and they're anxious to get those antibody tests. So I guess if you tune back in a couple of weeks, if I didn't irritate or alienate everyone, I'll give you an update on whether or not those frontline emergency department personnel are getting those kinds of tests. That would be the first sign that you would see them being available in large enough quantities to hit enough people to hit the deemed essential workers first, and then move into the non-essential workers. So not sure if that was the question, but that's my answer, Danielle. So just stuck with it for tonight.
Okay, next up, Ron has a very timely question.
Does he? I want to pick fights with the questioners like the president did for about 2 hours tonight.
No, let's not do that.
That's not all right. We won't.
Okay, Ron asked, are there any bike trails in Galleon's future?
Yeah, I don't know. Is that Ron Van Winkle?
No.
Did he just wake up? Yeah, we've been trying for. I used to not even have gray hair when we started trying to build that bike path. Quite literally, from the early inception of becoming a mayor, we thought about building a bike path that it would at least run from Amix Reservoir on up through the city, in a path that we're now building part of it, and on up to Pico Park. Kind of that'd be a neat several mile. Well, 3-4 years later, we're really in a position where that first piece of that bike trail from across Bucyrus Road from Pizza Hut and the old Levant parking lot on through the old Children's Home property, and then in behind Hessenauer and popping out, if you will, in the south end down by the wastewater treatment plant. That project's under construction, and if you were in the west part of town over the last week or so, you probably heard chainsaws going and going and going, but you couldn't quite figure where it was coming from. That's where it was coming from. So trees have been cleared, and Iberia Earth Moving is the contractor, and they're on the job, and we hope to have a bike path by the end of the summer. So that would be a small section be honest with you, it's probably a great place for a kid to learn how to ride a bike without training wheels, and or a walking trail for, maybe somebody in their 60s. Somebody who's a bike enthusiast, as Matt is probably not going to do anything but warm them up and make them want a longer trail. But for many people, for a walking recreational trail or a down and back bike trail for youngsters, I'm pretty excited about it. And it may be one of the only recreational / construction projects that we get to open up this year. And we'll practice social distancing. Not sure if the deer back there get the social distancing thing, but they'll learn soon enough. So yeah, there is, Ron, a bike path, and that is a timely question. It only took us 5 years to get it done. So anyways, excited about it. I think it'll be a neat feature, and I don't know, man. I'm so bad at predicting, as people will remind me as we don't hit a date, but 4th of July to Labor Day. How about something indefinite, like about the time school opens again? How's that for not a funny joke? So probably the end of the summer. But what I'm hoping, folks, is that it'll be out there through the fall. And I've lived in that. I know that area for over 60 years, and it's really nice in the fall. It'll be an awesome time to open it up and have people. At that point, we'll need to be able to get outside. So thanks for the question, Ron. I owe you $10.
Okay, next question tonight comes from Chris.
Yeah.
He asked, what can citizens do to help the city or their fellow citizens?
Yeah, I think like a lot more of what's going on. I think that we don't seem to be a mask wearing town. I'm okay with that. I think there's an ongoing amount of self-consciousness. I don't know. I'll sound like the governor. I'm very pleased. You're doing a great job. You're flattening the curve, and you're getting us out of this sooner. No, I think they're doing a good job. I think the only thing I'd say, and this isn't a whine about not getting utility bills paid. I don't want it to be interpreted by some people who don't like me or critical of what we're trying to do here at City Hall, to hear this as a whine, but it's real important because we're, as I've said other times, such a small utility that if you have the means, if your income comes from Social Security or you have disability and hasn't been affected, if you're still working, I try to pay your bill on time. I'm real nervous about that. I get grouchy when I get nervous, and when I get grouchy, I snap at disc golf enthusiasts. And I don't mean to be, but I think to answer Chris's question, probably the best thing we can do is keep doing what we have been doing, which is, I think, been pretty compliant, and make sure that those city utilities, that it's not City Hall, it's you guys. We got 6,000 customers, and the amount of reserves we have are pretty limited. And I spend, and this sounds like BS, but it's not. I spend a ridiculous amount of time every day trying to analyze and make sure that we're anticipating those losses and revenues and as best we can, and then making sure we're able to make some cuts, but we're not, as they say, cutting into muscle or nerve that we're trying to trim around where there may be a little excess money. Like where would that be, for instance? We're probably slowing down on the depot. One of Matt and my favorite projects. We've worked really hard. It's never looked better. I mean, I don't think it's looked better since I was a little boy and they actually had passengers, but it's probably going to happen. We're going to finish up the projects we have now, and if revenue is as shaky as it appears it's going to be, we'll probably put that doggone thing on hold. So we're going to cut some spending, but I think the biggest concern, to answer the question, is to, if you have the resources, make sure that that if it's Spectrum in the city of, like, for once, let's hope Spectrum doesn't win, but I know I'm trying to compete with Netflix. So next, is there another question?
Yeah, I had a
Okay.
question from Larry going back to
Yeah.
testing for COVID.
Yeah.
According to President Trump, there are enough tests available for everyone. Is there any truth to that statement?
I don't know what to say. All I know is I can't get a haircut either. Oh, he seems to get a haircut, but I can't. I don't know what to say. It is for somebody like myself who has spent their entire life and my whole adult life involved in government and politics, my whole life interested in it when I was a little kid. I don't know what to say. I don't quite get it. Uh, I do know, and I mentioned this earlier today, one thing about government is they always overpromise. So at a time, don't when 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 great promises are being made, remember that throughout your life, however old you are, they always overpromise. They're like the uncle that said, "Hey, when I come over next time, I'll bring such and such, and we'll have all this stuff." Next time the dude shows up, he doesn't even remember what he said. So maybe, like I didn't have any uncles, so I'm just making that up. I have one uncle; he never would do that. But if you know what I mean, somebody who would promise you, oh, it's going to be this, it's going to be this. And that's kind of how government is. And I don't see how this would be any exception. So be cautious about any and all of the promises. I don't know. That's all I got to say. I don't know if there's test kits or not. I know one thing in Ohio, this administration is not going to roll back things very significantly until large numbers of essential workers, deemed essential workers, like city employees, hospital employees, are tested for the antibodies or for positive negative on the virus. So, my Lord, I don't know when the non-essentials will get their chance to be tested. So, back to Larry's question, if he's maybe skeptical about where those test kits are, I'm kind of with him. It's like, hey, if there's test kits, roll them out, man. We certainly need those to take that next step forward. So, yeah, that's about as far into a Trump question as I'm going to get, Anything else?
Yeah, I apologize. I missed a question from John that came in a little bit ago. Is there enough PPE for our first responders?
Yes, yeah, and I think among the stuff that is taken to the bank is the stuff that Battel's doing. It's interesting. My nephew got some publicity of what he's doing down in Nashville. His doctor, and there's a Wiggins kid that I remember. I think it's Jared. I remember him. Remember him as a catcher. He's a good kid. I imagine he's a hell of a doctor. But there's also another person in town who grew up here. I believe her first name is Melissa Moneysmith. And from what I understand, Melissa is part of the team down at Battelle that developed that sterilizing thing. So, I don't know, thumbs up to her, and we'll have to get Crawford County now to do an article about her too. It's probably one of the good things that's come about in the local media is that you see, why is it always all these really cool, bright kids? They're always somewhere else. They always move away. Oh well, we'll worry about that some other day. But it does make everyone in the community proud when you have young people who are excelling at the Mayo Clinic or at Vanderbilt or in Miss Moneysmith's case down at Battelle. So I don't know. What's that have to do with anything? What was the question?
Is there enough PPE for
Yeah,
our
I
first
think so.
responders?
And because Moneysmith came up with the sterilizing thing or was part of the team that did that, there'll be more. I'm really more confident in that aspect of the response maybe than I am of the testing. I think in both of them, we can all feel like we're a bit from Missouri, and we'll believe it when we see it. But I think that the masks and that sort of PPE we now have for our firefighters, our ambulance drivers. So those guys have what they need, as far as I understand, have enough of it. And same with the police officers. That's the key thing. Our service department employees are not as keenly interested and don't have the public exposure that those other two safety forces run into on a daily basis. So,
Okay, those are all the questions I see tonight.
that's it. Well, listen, I appreciate the calls, and if you play disc golf, you got a sense of humor. You wouldn't be out there doing that if you didn't have a sense of humor. If I offended you, get a hold of me and tell me I'm all wet. But come on, let's focus on. There are people dying. I think I maybe mentioned one of my old friends died over the weekend. It really changes it, when it's abstract. It's like, oh, this is all a big hoax and it's doing nothing but hurting me financially. And then somebody, good guy in 100 different ways, did all kinds of stuff. 40 years in public service, did a lot of stuff. It's a pretty crappy way to exit, but he's a true believer, so he probably went to heaven. But he probably took my place. They had one reserved for me, but that isn't the case. But anyways, God rest Wes Farbach's soul. And see you guys in a couple of weeks. Tune in tomorrow night. All's good from Guy, and we'll keep up. You keep up your chin up. I'll try to keep mine up. And if there's anything funny, let me know because I'm looking for a laugh. Good night.